So I did a really stupid thing on this blouse. It's actually kind of embarrassing. Technically it fits, but it doesn't feel right. So, welcome everyone to Goodknits here on YouTube. I'm Sherry, and this is a place where I talk about my love of knitting. For those that are new here, I am an expat Canadian living in Amsterdam with my husband, and I have been here for the last 7 years. Today I have a finished blouse number 2 that was done as part of my knit along for the Finish That Blouse Cal, and I have 3 pretty new whips, and for the first time in quite a while I actually have some acquisitions to talk about. So it's going to be a big episode and I have lots to say, especially on the blouse number 2, and some fails of my own to share with you guys today. So let's get going. Let's talk quickly about what I'm wearing today. So this is my finished Cumulus Tee by PetiteKnit. I made it last fall, and it is made in the Knitting for Olive Pure Silk in, what is the color? Plum Rose. It's made in Plum Rose. So I figured the sun is coming out, I would actually wear a non-sweater garment today because it's actually a little bit warmer than usual. Spring is coming. We just had daylight savings time last night, so it really feels like we are through the worst of winter. I actually thought I'd start today with a little bit of a quick update on my winter knitting plans. Now that we are entering into spring, I've done my spring knitting video. I figured it'd be good to just maybe do a quick wrap up on everything that happened in the winter. And I'm very happy to say that for the most part, I actually completed the vast majority of my winter knitting plans. I think in terms of garments, I did about 90% of them. So I had said, okay, Monday sweater was going to be my first cast on of the year, and I finished that at the end of January. I have the Gallant Sweater, which I am going to share with you today. It's very, very close to done. I was hoping I could fit it in for today's episode as a finished object. That didn't happen, but I'll update you on why. I've got the blouse number 2, which is my finished object for today. The cardigan number 4, which had been on my needles for 15 months. I finally finished that last month. And the only garment that I didn't complete for my knitting plans was the soft loop sweater, which I decided in the end, since we were coming out of winter, it was an item I was dying to have right now, and I could repurpose that yarn for more of a spring summer top. Also just to reduce the cost of having to buy mohair, well, a lot of mohair to pair for that pattern. But it is still on my list. I have the pattern, and I'm pretty sure that will come back around next fall, winter. I'd also talked about potentially doing some sort of zipper sweater, whether that was the half zipper sweater from PetiteKnit or the Lanark from Rebecca Clow or the Caidree. But I had said I was gonna see how I was feeling about that and then decide a bit in the season. If I was still really thinking about it, I would cast that on. And in the end, so many other patterns caught my eye, so I decided I don't really need a zipper sweater right now. If I want one, I'll come back to it next season. So I'm really happy with everything that I accomplished. I think it helped to be a little bit focused in the winter, especially because I had yarn for basically every project that I wanted to work on. I didn't complete any of the accessories that I said. So I talked about the cargo cowl by Caidree, the muscle bra hat by Isolde Teague, the penny gloves by PetiteKnit, and the whiskey neat socks by Maxim Cyr. And in the end, I do have the yarn for the penny gloves. I fully intend to cast them on, but probably not this year now. Same with the muscle bra hat. I do have the yarn, but I now have made too many hats this year. I think I will save that for next year. And I do actually have the yarn also for the cargo cowl, but in the end, I decided not to make it. However, I did replace all those items with other accessories. So I, for the most part, made the Berlin scarf by Suzanne Muller or Paula Strict. I just have the fringe to do, and that wasn't anywhere on my plans. I just really fell in love with it, decided my brushed alpaca from Drops would be perfect for it, so I cast it on. I also ended up casting on the Turtle Dove shawl by Sari Nordland. She had done the kind of mystery cal in December for that, and so I was in Canada, I bought yarn and decided let's cast that on and see how it goes. And then I ended up, in the end, even though I said I wouldn't, I ended up making 2 Oslo hats for myself. So I need to be done with the Oslo hat for a bit. It's time to move on. I have enough of them. Next year will be all about doing new hats. Hold me to that, make me accountable. So really happy with where I got with my winter knitting plans. If you watch my spring knitting plans, which I did a few weeks ago, you'll see I'm much more flexible this season. I have, you know, pieces that I would like to really cast on. I'll talk about some of that today because my spring knitting is really starting to kick off now. But I want to keep it a bit more flexible. I don't really have any of the yarn for any items, so you know, for the most part, I can do whatever I want this season, and I'm really excited about that, to just kind of finish an item and then decide what I want to cast on next. So that is the quick update for today. I also noticed as I was preparing for this video that now that the blouse number 2 is off my needles, this is the first time in a while that I don't have any PetiteKnit or My Favorite Things knitwear patterns on my needles. So I did say I think I said in my spring knitting plans that I really want to try to focus on knitting from other designers this season. And I'm really proud to say that I am doing that. I also feel like I've got quite a lot of new yarn that I am using. So I really want to try to stick to that, probably for the rest of the year. Like, let's try to branch out and try new things. Okay. Let's get into the knitting content. So my very first finished object of, my finished object of this episode is my blouse number 2, which the only reason that I'm not wearing this is because I figured it would be easier to talk about if I wasn't. So this is a pattern by My Favorite Things Knitwear, and I cast this on last September. Made a ton of very fast progress to get through the upper part and join in the round, and then, I don't know, I had other projects that I wanted to do. I kind of threw it to the side, and then in my winter knitting plans, I decided I really wanted to come back to this and finish it. And so I had asked people who would be willing to do a knit along for this so that we could all kind of motivate each other, or just any of the blouse patterns from My Favorite Things Knitwear. And quite a lot of people actually said that they also had this either on their list or as a lingering whip, and they would love to join a cal to really push them to finish it. So I think in the end there was around 20 of us that ended up having this project on our needles, and quite a lot of people finished it. So I think I'm one of only 3 that ended up doing blouse number 2. Almost everybody did blouse number 1. And I will insert B-roll so that you can properly see this, but I am really, really happy with how this turned out, but I do have quite a lot to say on it. However, let's first go through kind of the, I guess, like construction details. So this is knit top down, and what you end up doing is you cast on this top part in the round. You can see there's a bit of shoulder detail there. You do some German short rows to shape the back, and then you end up separating the front and back panels, and then you knit down the front, you knit down the back, and then you join back at the sleeve to join back in the round. So that went really fast for me. I don't recall having any real challenges with knitting that. I think, you know, it went quite quickly. The pattern is an 8-row repeat, and it actually is quite easy to remember, even easier actually flat than it is round, because when you're knitting in the round later, you end up having this side seam detail also on the sleeve, and that ends up causing on odd and even rows a slightly different change. So you get used to it really quickly, but it is something that you have to be mindful of. So I knit this in drops cotton merino in the color 8, which is marine blue. And I was really inspired by the pattern photos on this. Oh, yeah, you can see I have like some weird thing that happened during blocking that I'm hoping that stain will come out. I'm not sure what happened there. So an interesting thing on all the blouse patterns, so I started a group chat for this cal, and quite a lot of people mentioned that for blouse number 1, they were having real issues getting gauge. The top itself just was really, really big on a lot of people, and I know they had to start over a few times, so that's maybe something to be mindful of. And then for the few people that actually knit the blouse number 2, I also experienced this. Depending on the yarn that you use, it can be really elastic. So I know for a lot of people, this top ended up feeling like really, really oversized. I don't have so much that problem that it's really oversized, but what I am running into is this grew a ton during blocking. So I ended up not knitting to the length that she suggested. I think it was supposed to be like knit to 45 or 46 centimeters. I knit the size small, and then it was meant to grow to like 49 centimeters. I ended up casting off around 44 centimeters because it was feeling like it was going to be long enough. And then on the sleeves, she says to do 6 repeats, to do 16 of the repeats. And then that should end up, I think she said around, what did she say? Let me check. Yeah, okay, so she says to knit the sleeves until approximately 41 centimeters, which should be roughly equivalent to 16 repeat rounds for the sleeves. So I did that, and I ended up being like quite a bit off. I think I was at 35 or 36 centimeters. So I ended up, like, I kept going on my first sleeve, and I ended up going to 20 repeats, and then decided, okay, I'm gonna block it and then see how this thing grows before I do the second sleeve. And then I ended up blocking it, and it grew a ton, like to I think 50 something centimeters for the sleeve length. Like, it was basically here on my hand. So on the second sleeve, I was like, you know what, I don't actually mind the long sleeves. I'll plan to knit them to the same 20 repeats. And then I could tell, like, there's just no way I was gonna have enough yarn. So I got to 18 repeats and had to bind off because I just didn't have enough yarn. So my plan was go back in, reduce the other sleeve, and then have 18, which would be fine. It would still be long enough. So I ended up doing that. And like, this is how much yarn I have left, which is roughly, what was it? 22 grams left of yarn. So not a ton. So I did a really stupid thing on this blouse. It's actually kind of embarrassing. I don't even know if I want to share it because I'm just like, oh, okay. So what I ended up doing is I blocked my second sleeve to see how much that would grow. And, you know, I still had around, like, actually the second sleeve grew a lot, and I still had quite a lot of space, but I knew I had to go back in and rip back the first sleeve to be the 18 rounds of repeats rather than the 20. So yesterday I sat down and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go in, put in my lifeline, rip back the sleeve, and take out those 2 extra repeats. And I just held it up like this, only ideally more even, yeah, like that. So I held it up like this and was like, okay, which is the longer sleeve? And I didn't bother counting how many repeats I had. I just was like, okay, well, that's the longer sleeve. And then I put in my lifeline, I ripped back, and I was like, why do I have a magic knot in my yarn on this side? I don't recall doing a magic knot to join a new ball there, because I was using a lot of scraps at that point to try to, like, get through my yarn. So I just got lazy and I started doing magic knot. So I did the rip back, and then also I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, magic knot, that shouldn't be there. There's definitely something wrong here. So I counted my repeats and realized I literally ripped back the wrong sleeve. So I took 2 repeat rounds out of the one that was already shorter. So now it's 16. So I was like, so I've already bound off now. Do I redo the 2 repeat rounds, or do I just take 4 now out of the other sleeve? So I tried it on, and the sleeve felt long enough, honestly, the 16. And I think if I reblock it again, I'll get even more length out of it. So then I ended up on the second sleeve having to rip back the 4 rounds instead of 2. So that was really embarrassing. I'm like, why wouldn't I have double checked that I was working on the right sleeve? Like, it's just so stupid. Why would I just like, oh, okay, like, let's just, oh, now what's going on? Like, why would I just be like, oh, okay, that looks right. And now you can see, like, the sleeves are actually the exact same length in repeats, but you can tell the difference of blocking made on this. Like, this is the first sleeve, and this is the second one. And there is like a noticeable difference in the length. So I can also tell when I'm wearing it. So I need to reblock this thing probably right after this episode and see if I can get more length out of it. If I'm being completely honest, I am not sure how much wear I'm gonna get out of this. The yarn itself is like really heavy, really elasticy. I do like the overall style of it, but I think I only have like a couple pair of jeans that I can actually wear this with. And I don't know, it just feels like kind of a statement piece. So I don't know how much, I don't think I want to invest any more time on it, honestly. So I'll block it, and then I think I'm just going to live with however it looks. I did also go in and add the extra I-cord that she suggests on the neck, because otherwise I found the shoulder tips were sitting like here, and it was making the top look really lopsided. So it would like slide one way, slide the other. The I-cord, I ended up being 10 stitches short from what she recommended, but actually I'm really glad it fits perfect, and it really just ended up cinching it perfectly to sit on my body. So I would recommend that not be optional. I would say definitely do that I-cord for the neck so that it really sits on you properly. I will also say from this, the Drops Cotton Merino is a really, really great alternative to bring the cost of the project down. So I had to buy 10 balls of this yarn, which cost me $39.65. So this top was under 40 euros. I think it's definitely worth that. The only thing is, I think with cotton in general, I also had this exact same issue with the We Are Knitters cotton. It's really splitty. So I find it unravels on itself when you're trying to knit. You're constantly like putting your needle, especially if you're using sharp tips, through the yarn itself, and I just don't find it to be an enjoyable experience. This top also feels heavy. It's like really stretchy, so I don't think I'd be in any rush to use this yarn again. But if you do want a cheaper alternative to the, I think it's Rama Petunia that she suggests, this is a really good option, especially if you don't think you're gonna wear this top a lot. Like, this was not a top that I wanted to invest in because I didn't think I'd get a lot of wear out of it. And it's probably like a 1 or 2 season piece. So I am happy with my decision there to not invest more. And I think the yarn is a good option, though if I was gonna pick a cotton merino in the future, if you're wanting to invest, I still think like knitting for Olive held double for also a DK weight would be my preference. I don't find it has the same issues in terms of weight and yarn splitting. Let's also talk a little bit about the pre and post block sizing of this. So pre-block, I had 44 centimeters in length and 38 centimeter sleeves and 102 centimeter diameter. Post block, I ended up at 49 centimeters length, 42 centimeter sleeves, but that's after taking the length out, so I don't really have like an accurate comparison there. I'm pretty sure before I took the length out, they were closer to 50, and 100 centimeter width. So actually I ended up for the length exactly to pattern, which was 49 centimeters for size small. And in terms of the diameter, I was only 2 centimeters off. The pattern said 108, I was 106. That's fine. My bust is around 87, 88. So I ended up with enough positive ease there. Another thing I do like about this pattern though is this repeat is super forgiving in terms of mistakes. So I made so many mistakes on this sleeve. And honestly, I don't think you can really see any of them. Like I was doing weird yarn overs, I had weird splits, and really like, I can't tell, I can't find a single one of them. So that's really nice that, you know, especially in a dark color in this pattern, I would say if you're a beginner kind of adventurous knitter and you're wanting to take a risk, this is a good one to maybe try your hand at more of like a textured garment, especially if you use a darker color. So that is blouse number 2. Thank you again to everybody that participated in the Finish That Blouse Cal. I really enjoyed seeing all your projects, but also just like having the group chat, sharing experiences. I will be announcing the winners probably, you know, the same day or before this podcast goes live. And I will do that over on Instagram and DM whoever the winners are. So thank you again. Maybe more cals in the future from me. So that's blouse number 2. Now let's talk about the main whip that I've been focused on for the last few weeks since I finished the last podcast. So I shared my, where is it? I shared my Gallant Sweater last episode, and it was roughly like a few rows below the splitting for sleeves. And if you will remember, I said, oh, it feels a little bit small, but I'm pretty confident that it's gonna be fine. Well, I think like even that evening after I filmed that episode, I was like, I've tried it on, technically it fits, but it doesn't feel right. So I found a negative ease sweater in my wardrobe that is just store-bought, and I decided to place the Gallant Sweater up against that, and I'll insert a picture. Like it wasn't even close, and there's no way with blocking that it would look the same. So it just kind of reaffirmed that the top yoke was way too small and my gauge was definitely off on this sweater. And since this is such an expensive yarn, I really didn't want to end up with a sweater I wasn't going to be happy with, because like this color is just, oh, sorry, sun. Oh, it's funny. You can see the shadow of my tripod there, sorry. But yeah, this yarn is just like way too gorgeous. I didn't want to waste it. It is the Woolfolk 4 yarn in Aubergine, I think color 40. So I made the tough decision to just rip back the entire yoke and start over on a half, well, so actually I didn't know what size needle. I was pretty off. I ended up going from a 4.5 millimeter to, what did I do? Yeah, so I ended up gauge swatching on a 5.5 millimeter to see how that was. Okay, first. So before I ripped out the sweater, I did a gauge check, and it was 23 by 34, and it should have been 20 by 28. So I knew it probably was not going to block out to the correct size for that. So I went up to a 5.5 millimeter needle from a 4.5, and that ended up being like way too gapey, especially for this yarn. It really didn't work. I knew immediately my gauge was off. So I decided to go with 5 millimeter needles for this. I didn't gauge swatch again for it because that was the only other option for needle. Oh yeah, the 5.5 millimeter was 19 stitches pre-blocked. So definitely 5 millimeter was the only real option there. I actually ripped it out at the perfect time because it was a couple days before we were leaving for Italy, which, by the way, my husband and I went to Northern Italy, South Tyrol, or the Dolomites for 4 nights to just have like a winter wellness spa vacation, and it was incredible. If you have never been to that part of Italy, I highly recommend you look into it and put it on your list. We go every couple of years, and it's one of our favorite places in Europe. So if you just like mountains, skiing, if that's your thing, good wine, good food, really, really recommend. And I think it's one of those places that like especially North Americans don't really tend to go because they don't know about it. So it's also not really touristy. But anyway, I knew I was gonna have a lot of knitting time on that trip. So I'm glad that I ripped this out and started over, because I essentially got through the entire body on that trip. And then on the plane ride home, I ended up starting the sleeve. So this is like a super basic, it's a pattern by Caidree. I don't think I mentioned that. And it's a really beginner friendly pattern. It's really easy to follow. There's no German short rows in this, which I was really trying to see if I could get away with just using the 6 skeins of yarn that I had without having to buy any extra. So I opted not to add in German short rows myself. Now that I know I have ended up buying an additional ball of yarn in the end, I wish that I maybe had added in those German short rows. But yeah, also if I had knit this to the recommended length of only 21 centimeters, I probably sort of could have gotten away with the amount of yarn that I had. But I would really love to know who has ever actually knit the sweater to 21 centimeters, because that is so short. Like I put it on, I'll insert a picture. I was wearing high-waisted yoga pants and I had like so much space between the bottom of the sweater and the yoga pants. So I don't think I have any clothes that I could have worn that would have like fixed that. So I ended up adding more length. I didn't write it down, but I think I ended up adding 6 to 7 extra centimeters of length. We'll see when it blocks out how much it grows, but that essentially goes to my hip bone now. Also good to know, for this sweater, I ended up taking out a round of repeats because I think the medium was gonna be a bit too oversized for me, but the small didn't have enough positive ease. I don't know if it's common with all of Caidree's patterns, but the small and medium had like quite a big size difference versus the extra small and small only had about 5 centimeters. So if I had knit the small, I think I only would have ended up with 2 centimeters of positive ease, and I definitely wanted closer to the 10 that the pattern recommended. So I ended up going for a size medium, but by cutting out that extra round, I think I cut out 8 stitches of repeats. So that means I ended up with 70 for the sleeves and 96 for the front and back. So this looks like a typical raglan sweater, but these increases are actually done as lifted increases. So they're not your typical, just like make one right, make one left. You do them slightly different. I know many people mentioned in the project notes that they don't necessarily love this. They think it's a bit too subtle, it doesn't add much. But personally, I really like how it turned out, especially with this yarn. I think, you know, it's a nice subtle detail and I think it works well for this pattern. So I'm happy with that. It was also a new technique to me that I've never done before. And I'm like, actually, maybe I'll just pop this on. Yeah, there. So obviously I have a Cumulus Tee under this, but I'm really happy with how this is working. So in the end, it's going to be around the same length as my Cumulus Tee, which is already blocked. And then the sleeve, I think, is going to definitely stretch a bit. Honestly, even with the 7 skein of yarn, there wasn't a whole lot of extra length that I could have gotten, because I know, so I technically would have been done the sweater a week ago, which would have been my fastest sweater knit ever. I think it would have been 2 weeks then from when I restarted, but I had to order this. It actually was really hard to find this Woolfolk yarn in Europe. A few people had Woolfolk, but not the 4 yarn. So I found a place in Germany, and it took like exactly a week to get here. So that meant I couldn't work on the sweater at all. So I started this sleeve yesterday. I think by the end of tonight, I'll be done. But I know the sleeve will take this whole skein. And then I do have like a tiny bit left from one of my other skeins that I use for the body. So really, I just have to make it work for whatever length I can get out of this. I'll talk about all the project costs when it's a finished object, but this is definitely one of the most expensive yarns I've ever worked with, and especially ordering it in Europe ended up being, I think, almost double the price of what I paid in Canada for this yarn. So I wasn't open to buying any more of the yarn, because also I picked this pattern because I do like the pattern, but I'm not completely in love with it. It's not like a dream sweater for me, and I wasn't really wanting to spend this amount of money on it. But originally I picked it because it was one of the few patterns that really use like a minimal amount of yarn at a higher needle size or a bigger needle size. So I figured, okay, well, it's kind of one of the only options, so I'll use this. The sweater is actually the Mohair Gallant pattern that I'm following, but I'm only doing that because it called for worsted weight, which this is, and I'm actually really happy with how it's turning out without the mohair. But yeah, if I'd known I was gonna buy more yarn anyway, I maybe would have picked a slightly different pattern, but we'll see. I think a lot will be said once I'm actually wearing this in real life and how happy I am. I do think I'm gonna regret not adding in the short rows. Okay, let's make sure the hair is back to normal. Yeah, so great holiday knit, made a ton of progress on that vacation. I think it's the only reason that I knit it so fast, because I was literally sitting in like the quiet room of the spa, knitting away. We also had really nice weather, so we were able to sit outside under blankets and knit. And it was just really nice having like that mountain view. It was perfect. I enjoyed it so much. So Gallant Sweater Mohair edition by Caidree, size medium. And I fully expect, I know this will be a finished object next podcast. And this will definitely be, even with that week delay, I think the fastest I've ever made a sweater before. So very exciting. Okay, then we get into the spring knitting officially kicking off. And I'm not gonna go into a ton of detail on this specific project in this podcast, because I am recording a whole vlog series on the process of making it, but I will touch on it here. So this is the start of my MELIDES Dress by Goodknits. And this is a whole, like, just below the knee length dress for spring, summer. You do knit it flat, which I originally had big dreams and intentions to modify it and knit it in the round, and then I ended up having so many challenges with this cast on. I will spare all the details here, but in the end I ended up trying to cast it on 10 times with the provisional cast on, because with this you provisionally cast on so that, you know, this is the kind of lower bodice section below your bust, and then when you pick up stitches you end up knitting the skirt down. So you have to have like also a provisional cast on that's a little bit like tight. I don't actually know if I'm trying to say that. So I tried to do this provisional cast on with a try-on tube, and I got a few rows in once I finally gave up knitting flat or knitting in the round and finally started to do it flat. And I just had like such a big gap between the try-on tube and the first row of stitches. And so I really didn't feel good about that. I didn't want to finish the whole bodice and then realized I couldn't work with that cast on. So I ended up ripping it out and starting over, and you will see that I just ended up doing the provisional cast on with waste yarn. So I really hate the provisional cast on with a crochet hook. I am completely useless at crochet and I refuse to do it. So this is my usual go-to method. The reason I was trying to use try-on tubing or even like a cable cord was so that later it would be easier to just pick the stitches back up and put them on my needle. But I just think it was really leaving too much space within the stitch itself. So I'm glad I went back to this method. I'm also glad I gave up trying to knit in the round, and I'm just doing the top flat. I will say, like, I did this purling, or sorry, I did these like 40 rows in an afternoon. So it actually hasn't been that bad to knit back and forth. I know everybody that sees this pattern is like, oh God, okay, you know, 3mm needles, knitting flat for that much time. But because you're always like increasing or doing, there's these really nice dart stitches. Because you're always doing something, it actually goes really quickly. So, you know, I say that now because I haven't done the rest of the top, but if this is already the bottom part, I just have the bust and then you split for the straps. And this is reversible, so you have a V-neck and then a square neck on the back. And I feel like it's actually gonna go pretty quick. Where I don't want to knit flat is on the skirt. So I think what I'm actually going to do is have the top be flat so that I can button it up, easily get it over my body. But because I'll be putting it on over my head, I don't think I'll have any issue with knitting the skirt in the round. So I think what I'm going to do is when I get there, put the stitches back on, cast on 2 new stitches, do them as purls, and then just knit the skirt in the round and maybe add a bit of a slit at the front bottom when I get there. But I'll document all of this for the vlog. I'm not really sure, I haven't gotten there yet. Just an idea that's kind of rolling around in my mind. I am also really, really happy with this yarn color. So this is the Knitting for Olive Pure Silk in petroleum blue. Deep petroleum blue. And I also have a cami number 4 in that from a few years ago, but I don't love the style of that cami for me. So I'm really happy to have that color in a different garment. And I actually did have a really tough time picking colors for this dress because I didn't feel like a lot of the colors of the pure silk, which is a very limited range, suited me. A lot of people recommended this color, the plum rose, but I didn't want to make another garment in it. I do think it actually really suits me. I love this color, but I didn't want a dress in the same color as this because I do expect I'll wear this Cumulus Tee quite a lot. So this is the progress of my dress. I hope you will all follow along with the vlog to see how that's going. I'll get into more detail on the whole cast on process, but yeah, this is going to be a really long-term knit for me, and so far, now that I've actually gotten started, I'm feeling much better. Then the next whip that I have also was from my spring knit plans, and that is the SONYA Shirt from Suzanne Muller or Paula Strict. And I cast this on Friday because I was still waiting to finish casting on my dress. I was missing the yarn for my Gallant, and so I didn't really have anything to work on. So I decided to start this, and it doesn't look like much, but this is roughly 60 rows so far. So it's actually a really interesting construction. You end up casting on, I think, 160 something stitches. I'm making the size small, then you knit around, and then you put in some waste yarn. And what that's going to do, like you'll see, yeah. So it ends up lifting up this edge here. And what you end up doing later is you'll come back in, and there's where you can't see it here, but where the waste yarn is, you pick up all the stitches in here. And what that's gonna do is create the line across the back, which is really like the kind of differing detail of this top. So I thought that was really clever. And you basically knit this whole back panel, then you will pick up stitches for the right and left shoulders, knit them forward, join in the round, knit down, and then end up knitting back, or like knitting to enough length that you join in the round, and then it will become stockinette. So right now I have a lot of projects where, I know other than the sleeves of my Gallant, where I'm just knitting back and forth and having to purl. So I am really missing a stockinette project, but I'm hoping if I just put some dedicated time into this, I will be able to get to that point pretty soon. And then it will just be stockinette, and I think it'll go pretty quick. So this is on 3.5mm needles. I am knitting it in the Gapard yarn, Wild and Soft in 146, which I think is Cafe Creme. I'm really loving this yarn. I think it's quickly becoming one of my favorites. And what is it made of? Always look these things up before you start recording. So this is a light fingering. It is 50 grams for 240 meters. And it is 60% wool merino, 40% silk. And it just like feels so nice. And then it's just like a really interesting texture, which when knit up just has this really nice sheen to it. So I am really, really excited to have this top in this color, in this yarn. And so far I'm really actually enjoying the process. Even though it's a lot of purling, I'm really craving to pick this piece up. So far so good on that one. And that is my other spring cast on. So those are all the active whips that I have right now. And then for the first time in quite a long time, I actually have some acquisitions to talk about. And so I talked about it in my spring plan video. I really want to knit a cardigan this year. I have quite a lot on my list, but the Brady loop cardigan from Other Loops is like top for me. And I've anxiously been waiting for this pattern to come out. And it came out on Wednesday, March 28th, I think. And I immediately bought the pattern. I immediately bought the yarn. So this is the Assayer Jensen, I'm gonna imagine it's Jensen yarn in color 2S. So it is this like light gray. And I will be pairing it with the Assayer Mohair, which is one of my favorite mohairs of all time. It's so soft, it's like butter, and it's also in 2S. So originally I was hoping to find more of like a heather darker gray for this, but this yarn didn't really come in exactly the color I wanted. And I actually had a really tough time finding a mohair that matched exactly what I was looking for in terms of gray. And since this one is already quite light, I decided, okay, I'll just use them together. And I've already actually caked up one of them. So I am a bit worried that I've kind of ended up with that same really light whitish gray that my other cardigans are in, cardigan number 4 and cardi jumper, and I said, why do I keep making this color? But it is really pretty, and I didn't want to make this too dark because I really wanted that like braided cable to stand out, so I'm hoping this will work out. Yeah, I think I do need my 4.5mm needles, swatch for this and cast it on, but I am really dying to cast this on. I did decide to go with just the yarn that the pattern recommended because I've never worked with a specific yarn before. I have worked with the mohair, but I really wanted to give this a shot. The other yarn that she recommended was the Lang Yak. And I thought about doing that because I figured it would be cheaper, but actually each ball of yarn was 15 euros. And with the amount that I would have needed for size small, it ended up being even more expensive than this Hell with the Mohair. And it's already, I think I spent 155 euros on this yarn, which is a lot for me for a garment, but I figure this is a cardigan that I am going to get a ton of use out of. I think it's gonna be like a wardrobe staple. That's when I feel like I'm willing to spend the money on the yarn because I think I'm gonna actually get a ton of use out of it. And I also just asked myself, is that amount something I'd be willing to spend in retail for a similar piece? And if the answer is yes, then I will spend the money on the yarn. So yeah, in terms of other acquisitions, obviously I had the Deep Petroleum Blue Pure Silk, and then the only other thing is, so I ended up going to a button store in Amsterdam this weekend that a viewer, Nicola, recommended, and thank you so much for that because this button store was incredible. So they had essentially 6 cabinets full of every style of button and color you could ever want. And I had a chance then to basically like put up against my cardigan number 4, like every button I could imagine. So I ended up actually buying buttons online for this, which I did an Instagram poll on their seashell, and I ended up spending like 30 euros on them on Etsy. And I was so confident they were gonna be perfect. And then I got them and I'm like, oh, they're kind of pink and they don't really go, and it's not what I was imagining. So rather than buying online, I just really wanted to go to a shop and place them up against the cardigan and see how I felt. And I narrowed it down to 3 options. And then I ended up going with this one, which is like a really classic kind of pearly white, which, can I hold it? So not the perfect view, but yeah, I think I'm gonna be really happy with these. They don't distract too much from the cardigan itself, and I think they are kind of like the perfect white to go with this purpley like winter white or grayish white. So yeah, now I have 4 buttons. I can finally finish this cardigan, which is great. I have actually been wearing it way more than I expected I would, which I think a bunch of you said, yeah, if I dress it down, I'll probably wear it all the time. And that's true. I just tend to throw on a white t-shirt, put the cardigan over, wear it with jeans. Sometimes I'll like tuck it in a little bit so it looks like it's crossing. But yeah, I think I wear it at least once a week. So really happy with that because it was a cardigan I wasn't 100% sure about, but I get so many compliments every time I wear it, and just like the kind of balloon sleeves actually look really good. Okay, I think that brings me to the end of this podcast. In terms of what I'm doing next, I really think it's just gonna be grinding away on the MELIDES Dress and the SONYA Tee to try to make a bunch of progress on those. Obviously, I'm gonna finish the Gallant, but I don't think I'm really gonna be casting on much new. Maybe I'll swatch for the Brady cardigan. Maybe I'll actually start it before the next podcast. But I think I just really wanna keep some momentum going on my current whips. I'm not really expecting to start any kind of accessory projects right now. I'm not really feeling like I need it, but that could change. Those are kind of the projects where they come up out of nowhere. I am thinking of doing the Italian spring shawlette from Francesca, or an Italian knitter. I keep seeing her talk about that. It's her own free pattern. She talks about it a lot in her podcasts. And she was using a kind of gradient yarn for her latest one. And I thought that could be really, really nice. So I'm trying to see if I can find the right yarn for that so it kind of sells stripes. And if I can find something, then maybe I'll buy that and cast it on soon. Also, so that I just have like a really basic garter pattern that I can work on while doing all these other like kind of flat projects. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you liked what you saw. If you did, please go ahead, like, subscribe, go ahead and turn on those bell notifications. I post new podcast episodes roughly every 3 weeks and tend to pepper in quite a bit of other content. Also right now, like I said, I'm doing a vlog series for my MELIDES dress, and I plan to post 15 to 20 minute videos every few weeks for that as well, depending on how it's going and if I am making any progress. But I do plan to have a new video for that soon. Thank you again, and I'll see you in the next episode.